There are downsides in delaying an episode of this show for this long. In fact, this episode of DV has been planned and written in about 4 to 5 forms since at least July 2017. Hell, in DV modding should be allowed to exist. I know, catchy title. It was the first time I wanted to talk about today's topic, cross-platform play. But Take-Two wanted to stop modding in GTA 5, so that took priority. This episode kept getting these sort of delays because there were better and more pressing things to talk about, rather than Sony denying cross-platform play. Also, by the time I wrote a script and I was about to record the voiceover, new information would come out a few days later, and because of the way I work, that completely invalidates a lot of the video. Normally, Sony being smug about their decision, so it says a lot more about Sony, doesn't it? I delayed this episode so much to the point where Sony actually caved into demand, making about 70% of this script needs to be rewritten for the past tense, and for the 6th time. This example of me putting things off perfectly mirrors Sony and its procrastination on getting a solid answer out of them on the topic of cross-platform play. They flip-flop between the excuses of cross-platform isn't viable because our investors said so, to doing their best Helen Lovejoy please think of the children impression. I'll go into further details of the excuses as we go through this sort of timeline-themed video, so stick around. This is a long one. For this episode of DV, I want you to cast your mind back to the far-off date of E3 2017. This was the event that saw 4K be the biggest buzzword in gaming since, well, every tech event for the past 5 years. Shots taken and fired from all journalists from across the globe on a variety of subjects. EA and Ubisoft using influencers, YouTubers, in their press events, and Evolve Digital being the sarcastic trollish company that they are, mocked E3 and the press conference routine in the only way it knew how, by throwing money at a monitor and headsplosions. When Devolver had stopped making fun of the E3 committee, we all then remembered about that cross-platform initiative that Microsoft told us about a few days beforehand, even going so far as to contact Team Nintendo to make the cross-platform play between consoles as well, not just with PC. Let's talk about that. The cross-platform play part, not the messy headsplosions part. Microsoft, of all the AAA companies I know, have started to get a reputation for being, and this is the 2nd time that I'm going to have to say this in this series, consumer friendly. That's a hard sentence to say in here, I know, but from their business goals it does make a lot of sense. The PS4 Pro and the Xbox Scorpio Xbox, yes, I'm not calling the Xbox One Xbox because screw your puns, Mike. They're trying to emulate the PC's positives. Not in a technical sense though, that obviously helps. I mean in its services. Microsoft does refunds via the Windows 10 store and via Xbox One, akin to Steam refunds or GOG refunds, and are already starting a service of renting games on its home console for $10 a month via its Game Pass service, something which I'm actually an advocate for, so long as they don't screw it up. Their scheme of allowing cross-platform play between games on consoles that they have no control over is a legitimately surprising one. The first 2 games that supported this initiative were Minecraft, because of course it was, and Rocket League, because Rocket League will run on bloody anything. The cross-platform initiative, boringly named Xbox Play Anywhere. Who comes up with your servers names, Microsoft? Anyway, at the time of the announcement back in E3 2017, it supported the Xbox One, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and even the freaking Nintendo Switch, as I said above. Like with Xbox Game Pass, there is an unfortunate mouldy cherry on an otherwise perfect pie. The mouldy cherry in question? Well, for once, it's not Microsoft's fault. It's because Sony didn't want in on the Play Anywhere initiative initially. I should probably stop going to AAA bakers. In theory, for Rocket League, pour exemple, the cross-platform chart should look like this. But it doesn't. The chart looks like this. It's a complete joke. As you can see, while you can play against random players on PS4, Xbox One, Steam and Nintendo Switch that resides on their own consoles, Sony wouldn't allow anyone from other consoles to play with each other on the PS4, and because Sony wouldn't allow it, you can cross off playing against your PS4 buddies off of your to-do list if you have an Xbox One or the Switch and you want to scratch that Rocket League itch. The rhyme was not intentional. Sony's initial reasons? Because they wanted to protect kids on their platform. This said that they have no control of a kid's behaviour outside of the PlayStation ecosystem, and if something goes wrong, then they think they might get blamed. What Sony doesn't seem to understand is that it's not their responsibility to protect kids from outside threats. That's the parents' job. No, this whole deal has a financial whiff about it, not a please think of the children whiff. If they join in Microsoft's cross-platform scheme from when it was announced, then Sony would lose control of the garden that they've built to keep customers on PlayStation 4. Good for business, bad for customers is a bit of a TLDR. The sad part is that Psyonix claims that support for complete cross-platform play between all consoles and all platforms for their game could be added by a flick of the switch, and I am willing to believe them. There is no way that this is hard to implement. It's just that Sony didn't want to play nice with other platforms and thus wanted to cut players off. This was even proven when Fortnite Battle Royale came out on consoles, with some users reporting cross-platform play with Xbox One and PlayStation 4 players. Epic Games had to very quickly patch it out before the lawyers at Sony could get involved, which made it more telling as to where Sony stood on the cross-platform initiative. Until recently, that is. Sony caved into demand and reluctantly started a beta program that allows for cross-platform play between basically everything. Sounds good, but there's a condition. Only Fortnite has cross-platform play as of writing, making other games like Rocket League still be locked out. My theory for this is because Fortnite was attributed for players wanting cross-platform play the most, while Rocket League rode on its coattails a little bit. Worldwide Studios chairman Sean Layden tried to one-up Psyonix's statement about it's as simple as flicking a switch by claiming that it isn't that simple, and there are other technical factors at play. It was discussed on episode 308 of the PlayStation Blogcast, and I have the segment here so you can listen to it in its glory. Let's listen to it, shall we?
This is something we know about. We know this is a want, this is a desire, and we want to be able to deliver that in the best way possible. Now, enabling crossplay isn't just about flipping a switch and there you go. It's a very multidimensional kind of attribute or a feature. So we have to look at it from a technical point of view. We have to work with our partners from a business point of view. We have to make sure that if we enable this, do we have the right customer service support? Do we have the right messaging out there? Do we have all of these different things that you have to get in line? And it's rather ordinal. You know, they have to go in a certain order to get them all set up. Mm-hmm. And that's why, though it's taken us longer certainly than even I would have wanted, but it took as long as it was going to take to get it ready and get it done, which is why we were able to not only announce it on this past Tuesday, but also enable it at the same time.
You claiming that it's got more than flicking a switch comes off as just arrogant more than anything. It's also not that technical as you claim because of the whole Fortnite having crossplay with Xbox One debacle that I mentioned earlier. The only thing you'd have to change is your terms of services that are geared towards developers. It's red tape. That's the issue. The issue is a political one that you want as little involvement in as possible. Not so much for the players as it is for the walled garden. Less catchy, but is every bit as true. Sean also dodged the question of whether or not Sony will accept more games into the cross-platform play program by repeating himself and giving pretty much the same answer as what he gave to, well, cross-platform play when they mentioned it.
Are we going to see this functionality rolling out to other titles?
Well, right now we're in a beta test program, and when you beta test something, you try to reduce the number of variables that are in the equation. So right now it's beta testing with Fortnite for crossplay. I think that certainly once we can prove that this is all holding together sturdy and well, I would anticipate seeing other games in the service over time.
All right, well, that's certainly good news.
If your answer to a yes-no question is ambiguous, then either you're not telling us something, and you know that something is bad, and are trying to hide it for as long as possible, or you're lying. I'm going with the latter. I can't even take Sony's attitude seriously for this whole deal when even kid-friendly Grandpa Nintendo, the ones that don't even try to compete with PCs or other consoles, the company that is notorious for being behind the times, the company, and I am mentioning this again because I find it incredibly egregious, that took 9 weeks to allow for their online play voice chat mobile app for the Switch to allow for the bloody screen to be turned off, as well as to allow for multitasking like any other VoIP app would. Nintendo joining in on the cross-platform scheme obviously makes sense, as they do cater towards the family audience and actually seem to lean on their own kiddie stereotype 99% of the time. They also try to keep everyone happy, and as businesses go, they're apparently quite open to this idea. To put another nail in the coffin on another Sony's lies, clearly Nintendo aren't worried about their kids on their platform, you know, them being kid-friendly and all that. So the excuse Sony gave for protecting kids is idiotic for 2 reasons then. Nintendo knows that collaborating with Microsoft is probably a good idea if you want the Switch to sell. Of course, I know the reasons why Sony wouldn't allow it. It's because Sony still thinks that a walled garden is the best course of action, when it clearly isn't. Without cross-platform play, the PS4 ecosystem is easier to police and to control. It's why PSN and Xbox Live haven't crossed over before, because audiences were deliberately separated arbitrarily by whichever console you went with in the 7th generation of consoles. This was easier to get away with back then, as there were legitimate networking barriers. Hardware hardware differences, etc. But the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 are pretty much identical specs-wise. Just calm down, fanboys. Even the hardware upgrades for both consoles are so similar. It comes down to whatever's in the SDKs for each platform. You could even make the argument for the Switch being hard to implement this cross-platform functionality, given its hybrid console nature and the fact it isn't a glorified PC, rather than a games machine meant for games. But it has it. Nintendo approved it. The more you stare at Sony's past actions about this whole debacle, the more holes you can see in their past actions. Like the time when, after E3 2017, one of Sony's first statements when asked about cross-platform play was because their investors said that cross-platform multiplayer is a waste of money, before quickly switching to Helen mode and claiming that they were thinking of the children's safety. Did I not mention that? Do they not know about parental controls on the PlayStation 4? I swear the PS4 has them. Or, how about a more recent and very arrogant reason was due to narcissism, it seems. I'm not kidding. Sony thought that their version of a game was the best, despite that being a paradoxical statement in of itself when it was published. It cannot be the best version of the product, as you claimed, Sony, if it was missing features that other versions had, like cross-platform play, making it a lesser experience. And while some games that utilize cross-play may be better on the PS4 in some other areas, such as graphics compared to the Switch, it's an inferior product when it comes to the social aspect of its platform, because it can't connect to other consoles, even with the PS4 cross-platform beta program, which only includes Fortnite as of writing. If a trio of Rocket League fanatics wants to buy a console each, one console per person, then the person that bought the PS4 would be in for a nasty shock, as Rocket League won't let you play with others outside of the walled garden on the PlayStation 4. That person, motivated by anger at this, will sell their PS4 to get what the other friends have, like a Switch or an Xbox One, both of which, if you haven't cottoned onto this already, allows for cross-platform play on Rocket League, Fortnite, hell even Paladins, oddly enough. You've been hoisted by your own petard there, Sony, haven't you? If you try to subdue the social aspect of your platform to only include your own platform, then people will not take kindly to it. Allowing cross-play to Fortnite does not make you seem gracious, it makes you seem desperate to shut people up about this issue. Don't, by the way, keep at it, internet. One of the few aspects of console gaming that still makes it popular is that its social features are, while simple compared to Steam, Discord and, well, PC in general, it's good enough for what players actually want, to play with friends. Unity among friends brings people to play on your consoles, especially in local and friend lobby online matches, so adding arbitrary network limitations that stops people from other consoles connecting in your developer terms of services is, well, just stupid, to be honest. Face it, Sony, if you want to compete in this market, you might want to start playing nice with other companies, at least when it comes to not screwing over your consumer base on playing with friends on other platforms. You're not the kid's guardian, stop acting like it. Sony is acting like a 5-year-old who believes they'll catch cross-platform Cooties by playing with all the other kids in the playground. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no such thing, so embrace the future instead of being one step behind it. And you do not want to be behind old man Nintendo, now do you? It is not a good look for you. Tell you what, why don't you honour your advertisements, Sony, and do it for the players? Just open it up to everybody. And with that, I thank you very much for listening. You could tell I've been wanting to do this for a while.